All right, welcome back to Fireside Chats. We are so excited that you are here with us for our second episode. Thank you so much for listening. Again, Fireside Chats is an offshoot of the Emory University Pre-Health Advising Office, really helping any pre-health students discover unconventional pathways to the healthcare field, amplifying underrepresented voices in the healthcare field, and overall helping students explore different options that they have. So today we have some really amazing other pre-health advising mentors with us. We have Denver, Sabina, and Alex, who are going to be talking with our first official non-Emory Pre-Health Advising Office guest, Charlie Lane. But before we introduce Charlie Lane, Denver, Sabina, Alex, do y'all want to go ahead and introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit more about who you are?
Yeah. So my name's Denver, and I am a senior, so graduating May 2022, woohoo. Majoring in human health, and I'm minoring in French, and I'm on the pre-med track, so, ultimately MD or DO is the goal. Going to be taking a gap year, hopefully to teach English abroad in a French-speaking country, and yeah, I'm excited to be here and to interview Charlie today.
Hi, my name is Sabina. I'm currently a junior. I'm majoring in neuroscience and behavioral biology, and I'm minoring in religion. I'm currently on the pre-med track, but my religion minor is actually how we got to know Charlie, so I'm really excited to be on this episode today.
Hey y'all, my name is Alex. I'm a senior. I'm graduating 2022, like Denver. And like Sabina, I'm majoring in neuroscience and behavioral biology, as well as religion. On a double major, and that's how I got introduced to Charlie. I'm really excited to talk to him and get his insights in the pre-health journey. I know it has impacted my own pre-health journey and how I think about becoming or going into medical school. So I'm excited to talk to him.
Yeah, so a little bit about Charlie. We actually all met Charlie in a meditations course we took through the religions department. He spoke more about his own pathway to medicine and how practicing cognitively based compassion training has really helped him on his journey and informed his decisions. So Charlie Lane served as a U.S. Navy nuclear submarine officer for 6 years before starting medical school at Emory University in 2018. He is a yoga and meditation instructor, and in 2020, he completed a certification in cognitively based compassion training, CBCT, which he will speak more about. He has elected to delay medical school graduation for a year to work on a project in medical humanities and quality improvement, which really seeks to create a paradigm shift in the content, context, and culture of medical education to more deliberately train and support the enaction of compassion for self, interprofessional colleagues, and patients. He is undecided on which field of medicine he wants to complete his residency training in, but he is absolutely fascinated by the growing field of trauma-sensitive intervention seeking to reintegrate mind and body. So in the episode today, we will talk more about Charlie Lane's journey through being a U.S. Navy nuclear submarine officer, how meditation and compassion has helped him throughout his years in the Navy and on his path to medicine, and more about his project, really working to unite different professionals in the healthcare field through compassion. So without further ado, let's jump into the episode.
One thing I guess we kind of first wanted to ask you, so we know that you were in the Navy for 6 years before you started at Emory, and so you're in med school now, but what drove you to, start in the Navy, to join the Navy?
Yeah, so my dad's recently retired, I guess 5 years now he retired. He was a Navy physician, and so I grew up moving around and really enjoyed that lifestyle. And to be honest, had I not experienced it, I thought would have never crossed my mind to even apply. But as I was applying to college, I was graduating from high school in Okinawa, Japan, and applying to schools in the U.S. and to ROTC programs. And so that's how I ended up in the Navy. The submarine service is a whole nother story, because at the end of the day, it's not so different from medicine when you're applying to residency, in that it's a lot of what you want to go into, and then a lot of what they need. And so for the Navy, I didn't want to go into the submarine service, but they needed someone to go into submarines. So they told me what to do. And when it comes to the Navy, you say, "Yes, ma'am."
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about your responsibilities in the Navy? What type of boat, if you were in a ballistic sub, fast attack, guidance missile?
Yeah. So I was on a fast attack submarine, USS La Jolla, out of Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. And before you get to your first submarine, you have a little over a year of training that you have to do. So I, in October of 2011, started at Nuclear Power School in Charleston, South Carolina. That's a 6-month didactic learning, so a bunch of PowerPoints, all about nuclear engineering, electrical engineering, and mechanical engineering, and how they come together to make a submarine go through the water. And then after that, you go do 6 months of training either in Charleston or in Saratoga Springs, and that is on a live reactor, starting it up, shutting it down. You have to shadow all the ancillary staff of the engine room, so the mechanics, the electrical operators, the reactor operators, the chemists of the plant, and you have to learn what they do. And so you do a lot of book learning, and then you go out onto the plant and start up the reactor, shut it down, run some casualty drills, and then go back to the books, and then learn a little bit more and go back to the reactor. So you do that for 6 months. And then there's 2 months of something called Submarine Officer Basic Course in Groton, Connecticut. And then after that, you go out to your first submarine. And so I was in Pearl Harbor. And when I got to the boat, your first responsibility is really to get qualified. Even though you've done all this training, every platform is a little different. And so you have to learn the ins and outs of the boat that you're going to be serving on. And it's a lot of the same stuff, book learning and shadowing individuals and learning what it is that they do and how they come together to make electricity for the boat and make propulsion. And all the while that you're getting qualified, I was also a division officer. So I was in charge of the reactor controls division. And they work with all the software and hardware for maintaining reactor safety. And so they run, periodic maintenance, and if something breaks, they're in charge of fixing it. And so I was in charge of about 9 sailors, and a lot of the maintenance that they were doing, I had to, they know much more than I would ever know about this, but my job is to kind of oversee what they're doing, double check their work, and then also know a little bit more about their personal lives. Like, are they okay at home? Do they have enough to eat? Are they sleeping well? And things like that.
Was worrying, or not worrying, was inquiring about their personal life something like standard that most officers, or right, because that's the problem. Okay, officers would do as well, or is that something you kind of learned, like actually made them feel more inclined and built that relationship that I remember you telling us in class was necessary to build a team? Like, you kind of have to foster that close connection and things like that. Like, was that a standard approach that most officers had?
If you read the manuals about being a naval officer, they would say yes. But just like every organization, there are good leaders and not so good leaders, and so some people are a little more focused on just the facts and just the work, and some are a little more concerned about the individuals behind the work.
Yeah, so it sounds like this experience in the Navy, you had to learn pretty much everything that was going on in the boat. How is this comprehensive experience translated to how you approach medicine and kind of the holistic approach to human health?
Yeah, that's actually why I've elected to take this year off. Is I didn't feel like we actually spent enough time getting to know the ancillary roles of healthcare, um, and just this idea that we can be siloed as doctors is false. In order for anything to happen, you need the phlebotomist, you need the nurses, you need the techs, you need social workers, you need ethicists, chaplains, like all these people that make caring for an individual possible. And when we silo ourselves in the ivory tower of medical school, and then go out and learn under residents and attendings, we start to see all the other people that make healthcare possible, but we don't actually learn from them. And so now I think that's a crucial part of, of being a doctor and being an effective doctor. And as I talk to more senior physicians about this thought that I've had, they're like, yeah, I didn't realize that I needed to it's the nurses that I needed to have a good relationship with in order to actually care for the patient. And it's the phlebotomist who I needed to know what they were doing to actually make sure we got labs drawn on time, or that I knew how to put in the orders for the labs. But they didn't learn that till residency, which is a little late, because at that point you're really overwhelmed with caring for patients and learning your role as a part of the care team. That to learn all of these other things, I think is a lot to ask. So I think we should bring that into our early medical education.
So how do you see, ideally that being implemented? At what point, and sort of how, and is that exactly what you're going to be looking into with your year?
Yeah, it's one component of what I'm looking at this year, and in my mind, I think within the first 2 years we should be learning from all the allied health professionals. So in our hematology module, after we learn a little bit about blood analysis, we should then go shadow a phlebotomist, see how they draw blood, what it's like to receive an order to draw blood, and then go back to the lab and see the techs analyzing the blood and see what all is going on. So that then when I give an order, in the middle of the night to draw labs, I know exactly what that order entails and who all is involved in it. And so that's one example. I think some things fit well into the modules that we already have set, like phlebotomists and techs. There are other things like scrub nurses that that don't fit so well into the first 2 years, but I don't think that should preclude us from being able to get into the operating room before we are in our clerkship years. I think I was fortunate enough to have spent some time in an operating room in Cambodia before coming here. And so I learned a little bit about how to scrub and how to hold surgical instruments and kind of how the team worked together to perform a surgery. But so many of my colleagues and classmates had never been in an operating room. And when you walk in, you have to maintain sterility, right? And that's the scrub nurse's role, is to make sure that everyone maintains sterility in the operating room. And they end up kind of not knowing what to do with their hands or where to stand and feel uncomfortable. And so they're not so much focused on what's actually going on in the surgery and what they should be learning as medical students, and kind of more about where to be and how to stand. And so if we had instead learned from a scrub nurse beforehand, we would know the names of the instruments a little bit better. We'd know how to scrub. We know the ins and outs and the technical details of actually maintaining sterility. And then when we finally get to our clerkships, I think we'd be a little less uncomfortable in the operating room and be able to focus a little more on what the residents and the attendings are doing in there.
Yeah, so can you tell us a little bit about the exact programs or what you're going to be doing in this year to kind of, improve towards this goal of yours of understanding the different professions, and if you see this as kind of a realistic thing that could kind of come into a curriculum or be a viable option for future medical students.
Yeah. So again, this is one part of the project that I'm working on, and right now I'm still in the discovery phase of is this something that I alone think is important, or are there other students who want to learn this? Are there other educators who think this is important? And so right now we're just holding focus groups with educators and students we've done so far. We're in the process of analyzing those focus groups, and then my hope is to take what we uncover and go have semi-structured interviews with some leaders in healthcare about what we found. And I think it is feasible. It's not just me calling for more collaborative training, or interprofessional education is the official words associated with this idea in the Navy, in the medical world. In the Navy, we'd call it under instructions. You stand an under instruction under a mechanic, and you are under the instruction of this mechanic. And like the World Health Organization, I think it was in 2017, put out a manuscript for more collaborative healthcare and how that's crucial for safety and quality care. And then I'm fortunate in that our Dean of Medical Education really wants to bring more of this collaborative effort in and kind of break down the silos between the PT school, the PA school, genetic counseling school, the anesthesiology assistant schools, and just kind of make us work and learn from each other. So I think the feasibility is pretty good. What I think will be difficult is, yes, I think it'll be good to learn from other students, but I think it'd also be really important to learn from other professionals. And right now the workforce is really burnt out and already kind of overburdened. And so to add more to their plate of, oh, can you bring this medical student on as well and teach them what you do every day, is asking a lot. And that would require time and or financial compensation for this extra work. And that then goes to the business side of medicine. And I think there's enough of a business case to be made for improvements on safety and quality, and that overall you would reduce costs in healthcare. But we don't have hard numbers to prove that. And so how can you convince people to even give this a try?
Well, I'll jump in and say, so, for those of us those of you who don't know, Charlie came in and spoke to us in class about this concept called Compassionomics. And would you mind just telling us a little bit about what that is and where your interest in Compassionomics stem from, and how it kind of translates into the work that you're doing now?
Yeah. Compassionomics is such an interesting word.
Yeah.
I think they're this idea of compassion goes much deeper than what we are studying now. But at the same time, the fact that we're studying it and trying to uncover a little bit more about what compassion is, how do we enact compassion, how do we actualize compassion in our day-to-day lives for ourselves, for those around us, we're unpacking a little bit, and that's bringing it more to the scientifically minded individuals. And so Stephen Treziak and Mazzarelli, I forget his first name, are two doctors who wrote this book, Compassionomics. And they said if genomics is the study of genes, then compassionomics is the study of compassion. And the last couple decades has really been this burgeoning field of the compassion sciences, looking at the neuroscience behind compassion and how it's distinct from empathy, and uncovering this idea that when we care for others, we also benefit from that genuine care and concern. And so when I got to towards the end of my time in the Navy and was applying to medical school, I was looking for different programs out there. And already while I was in the Navy, I relied heavily on contemplative yoga practice and meditation practice to help maintain some semblance of grounding. I always joke, finding ground in a place where there is no ground. And it was really helpful. And I ended up teaching some yoga classes in the TG Lube Oil Bay, which just has these roaring pumps and a slick floor from all the oil that leaks around, and hot and from the steam pipes and everything. But I was able to host 3 or 4 mechanics or electricians down there to teach. That's right, exactly, exactly. And then we'd have to pause so someone could come by and take their logs and look at what pressure is this pump at and things like that. Yeah, exactly. And we got some sideways glances for sure. I remember one time actually I was in 9-man, which is one of the rooms that we sleep in, and it's dark and quiet, and I was meditating, and the messenger came around to, if you don't, submarine life is so different, right? No privacy, and they come and wake you up at all hours of the night to sign something, or but the messenger comes in and he got scared and ended up telling everyone in the control room that he had no idea what I was doing down there. But it was my way of kind of maintaining myself when there was, you're on an 18-hour day, so your sleep schedule's all off. You live and breathe just submarine life and work, and that can just be exhausting. And so I relied on this. And so when I was looking at medical schools to apply to, I looked at ones that actually had contemplative centers on their campus, and Emory happened to be one of them. And I remember in the application I wrote to get in here that I don't know how closely the Center for Contemplative Sciences and the med school work together, but I'd like to work to bring them a little bit more closely. And when I got here during orientation, they offered us a CBCT introduction, which was just wonderful.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so from there, I was like, well, this is what I came here to do. Thank you for offering it to me. So I took their foundations course, and then when the opportunity came to get certified as an instructor, I jumped on that. And that just led to more digging into this idea of compassion and what it means. CBCT is cognitively based compassion training. It was developed here at Emory in 2004, and it was actually developed to address mental health issues in the undergraduate campus. Dr. Nagy is one of the first Tibetan monks to have come over when we started the Emory-Tibet partnership, and that has since morphed into the Center for Contemplative Sciences and Compassion-Based Ethics. And his CBCT program is really a huge part of what made that metamorphosis possible. And since then, it's branched out into C learning, social, emotional, and ethical learning that is in all over the globe, really. And then the Create Teacher Residency is somewhat affiliated with it, where they work in helping teachers kind of work with the chaos of a classroom, and work, especially now with our social awakening. How can teachers work with students? How can they manage their own distress when trying to help students grapple with this upside down world that we're living in? And so there's really been a lot of great initiatives that are coming out of that. So that led me into these questions of what is compassion, and how do we actualize it, and it's an ongoing discovery process. I don't know if I actually answered your question there.
Well, no, that's perfectly segued. Well, how do you feel like the ideas that you've learned about what compassion is and its importance, how have they translated into, okay, we know that we can build more compassion if we foster more of a team partnership in the healthcare system? Like, is that kind of the idea?
Yeah.
How did it kind of translate into what you're doing now, this project that you're working on?
Yeah, so I struggled for a long time about, like, how do you actually present this to people in a way that you can present, how do you give an elevator pitch on this? And I'm still working on that. But so CBCT is broken up into 8 modules. Starting with Nurturance, that was like foundational practice of just tapping into your own when you felt nurtured before, and just remembering how important that is in your life to get you to where you are now. And that can be from, if you happen to have a good relationship with your parents, then that like loving connection that they may have shown you in a time that you remember that, or an animal, right? That just whenever you see them, they bring a sense of joy to you. Or if you're if you're out hiking and you've been there, or even just like a comfortable sweater or that chair that just feels just right, like whatever it is where you feel cared for and safe and valued, respected, heard, like all these things that help you to feel whole and complete and ready, to move on to the next thing instead of stuck in self-protect mode. So we would call that nurturance. And the idea being that if we can just tap into that helps us regulate, helps us feel a little more grounded, helps us realize how valuable that sensation is in the world, not just for us, but for anyone who lives in this world. And so we start with that grounding. And then we go into some more just kind of basic mindfulness techniques. The second module we call attentional stability training, and that's picking one object, whether it's your breath or just the grounding sensations, like the feeling of your shirt or the feeling of the floor beneath you, or just like sounds around you. Think something that is there constantly that you don't have to work to keep there. Like, and then you practice bringing your mind to that object and maintaining it there, and then noticing when your mind wanders and coming back to that object, and noticing when your mind coming back, and then and so building our attentional stability. And we go into present moment awareness, where we kind of let go of that one object and open the aperture of your mind's eye to this like unfolding, everlasting present moment, and just notice everything that is arising, any thoughts, sensations, sounds again, frustrations, and anything, and just trying to notice them without buying into them a little too much. And so we would call that present moment of awareness. How can you be here fully now without pushing anything away or excessively grasping for anything, including your breath, right? And can you just notice what's coming up? So those are kind of more classical mindfulness practices. And from there, we go into self-compassion. And it's just one of the best exercises, I think, to demonstrate this is to have someone think of a friend or a close one who comes and tells you, I didn't live up to my own expectations for myself. I let myself down, whether it was on an exam or something morally or anything, right? That they come and tell you, how would you respond to them? And we notice that we're usually pretty caring and kind and offer, this isn't the end. You're going to keep going on, like all these things. And then we turn it around and say, okay, well, how do you talk to yourself in the same situation? And we find that we are often just the worst critics of ourselves, right? And we are not kind, and we beat ourselves up. And Kristen Neff has really done a lot of great work in the world of self-compassion and studying things that show when we are kind to ourselves, when we speak to ourselves kindly, we're actually more likely to overcome, to resolve, to change, and to atone or to say that we're sorry for whatever it is that we had done. And so we kind of start with this idea of self-kindness. And so when you're sitting there in this meditation, it is fundamentally a meditation practice, and you notice something come up that you're not proud of, how do you talk to yourself in that moment? And can we start practicing being kinder to ourselves? And there's many tools that we use for doing that. One of them is just recognizing that we are not in control of anything. Right? We have a few things that we can do, but at the end of the day, nothing is 100% in our control. And so can we soften that blame that we're putting on ourselves for whatever it may be? So self-compassion in that way, and then self-compassion in the way of this is a part of the human condition, and all those around me are kind of suffering from the same human condition. And can I realize that I'm not alone in the way that I'm treating myself, that I'm not alone in having performed poorly on this exam, and that helps kind of bring this common humanity idea in, and again soften that self-criticism and bring a little more self-compassion. Then we take the next several modules to build the inclusive nature of our compassion. Now that we are kind to ourselves, can we see that I, like nothing is really within my control. I was born this way with some genes that lead me to believe certain things. I was raised in a certain household that led me to believe certain things. And can I see that other people, every other person on this planet, is in a similar boat, that they were born in a certain way, were raised with certain ideals, were sheltered from the world in some way to believe and think and experience certain things. And so if I harbor any malintention for someone, can I again soften that and just realize that it's not 100% in control? They may be operating on these automaticities as well, and that we're all subject to these biases that we're not proud of, but we have them. Period. So can we again soften that? So that's this inclusive nature, and then we look at gratitude, looking at our like interdependence and systems thinking, and then grow into engaged compassion. So when I look at those 8 modules, and I think how can we put that into a medical curriculum, I thought that we needed to start with nurturance, building a safe environment so our students always feel grounded and capable. And that includes having the right mentors and the right coaches, and having, a safe space for mental health check-ins, and making sure that you have enough time to do all the things that you need to do. And if you have a doctor's appointment, making sure that you feel empowered to say, I'm not going to be there today because I have to go here and take care of myself. And making sure students really feel safe. And from that safe grounding, how can we grow in our inclusion of compassion for others? And so that's where I think these working with ancillary staff is a huge part of it. Getting to know all the helpers in the hospital, so that we can see where we fit in the team and who we're relying on, and making sure that we'd extend that same concern for them as we do for our patients and hopefully for ourselves. And then now that we are growing in this inclusive nature, and I think that also includes a lot of, I'm on the diversity, equity, and inclusion new initiative that started at the med school, and they're working on things like moving from a bystander to an upstander. How can you empower students to notice when there are transgressions going on and actually to intervene? And then there's this engagement component that includes this, upstander, but then also I think we don't have enough contact with our senior medical students as a first and second year. I came in and didn't know any of my upperclassmen really, except for a few who came and talked about, what books to buy. And then I barely know any of the underclassmen and women except for those that I've taught CBCT to, or I've lectured a couple times for some of their ethics classes. But I think we need to break down those barriers a little bit so that we can, again, get some of that mentorship and coaching from those who have been through this. They, instead of just like this pump that we're in of like, as soon as you get here, you're on your own, you got to go through just to get to the other end. And now you're a resident and you're going to be told the same thing. Like, you just got to go through and get to the end. So at some point we got to like pause and check back in with why we came here. And I don't know. Hopefully this helps do that.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, it seems like compassion, mindfulness has really like helped you like throughout medical school. Can you talk a little bit more about how you kind of discovered compassion-based meditation, mindfulness, and how has it guided your path towards medicine as a pre-medical student and while you were in the Navy?
Yeah. So I had this interesting introduction to yoga, just through a friend who told me to go check out a class on campus. And I used to be a swimmer, and I think something about that link with the breath I had embodied it without really knowing it. And then I got to college, and college was a whole nother story, and I stopped swimming, and it wasn't until my junior year that I took a yoga class. And I still remember like laying in that first shavasana at the end of just where they said, let go of everything else and just breathe. And it was really like coming home after a long break of just like, oh, there's something special about checking in with the breath here. And that started this journey of discovery of yoga, which led to more self-discovery. And then when I was in my in Charleston doing a nuclear power school, you're in a room with only one window, and you're there for 12 hours a day, just learning by PowerPoint and tech manuals. And I would wake up before the sun came up, would go into this building, would leave after the sun went down, and then would go to a hot yoga studio and do an hour to 90 minutes of yoga, go home, eat, go to bed, and do it all over again. And so that routine of going to this yoga every day was really, it like transformed my life. And then when I was in Saratoga Springs for nuclear power school, or nuclear propulsion training, I got certified as a yoga instructor, and mostly for myself, just like deepen my own practice and learn a little bit more. And I was really grateful that I had those skills to then teach the sailors down underwater. And I, like, all this time I was like, oh, I know meditation is something I should be doing too, and would try, and I'd meditate for 2 days and then never again for a month, and try, and oh, I did it for a week this time, and then not for 6 months, and it wasn't until I was in Norfolk, Virginia, and a yoga teacher there gave this really great just introduction to meditation class. She just broke it down so simply and just said, we're just going to sit, we're going to follow our breath, and we're going to come back. And if you feel an itch, this was the first person who ever, like, I had itches and pains all the time and I didn't know what to do. And she was the first one to say, if you have an itch, you can scratch it. Right? But
Really nice.
yeah, she's like, but do it mindfully, right? So if you're sitting there, you notice the itch, first just see if it goes away. And come back to whatever your point of focus is. If it doesn't get away and still starts to bother you, then notice what it feels like to lift your hand up and bring it. And then notice the relief that comes when you actually do that scratch. And then as you bring your hand back down, notice as it comes down and where it lands. And then see again how you feel after you've scratched this itch. And I was like, oh, that's meditation. That just like maintaining that awareness throughout whatever you're doing. And so then that was when I started a daily practice. And it was just 12 minutes a day every morning of sitting. And I had a mantra of let go. There's just so much I was sitting with we had moved to Norfolk for a shipyard. So my submarine ended up getting turned into a training platform. So we were in shipyard. That's a whole nother, it's a whole nother experience to submarine life. And I just started relying on this meditation practice for everything that was going on as I was applying to medical school, and just grew from there. And as I was getting out of the Navy, I had learned more about meditation by that point, decided I wanted to go do a meditation retreat. And I also had an opportunity to work at the Portsmouth Naval Medical Center teaching yoga and meditation to the mental health directorate. And this was a program aimed for sailors who had experienced some traumatic event in their life, like a helicopter had crashed on a ship, someone's family member had passed away, really the gamut of things, and they just needed a break from work. And so we'd have them come to the hospital for a week. Actually ended up being 9 days as a bookended the weekends. And their only job was to show up and to learn some CBT techniques and to take this yoga class and learn a little bit about meditation, and really just come back to themselves and not have to work long hours in this environment that may have been the cause of the trauma. And so I got to teach there, and then I got to also teach the staff as a burnout prevention initiative. And so that, again, deepened that practice as I read through all the Yoga Sutras and developed my own meditation program. Uh, it was really. I still have some of those flyers that I used. It was pretty funny, but just some of the basics again that I had appreciated from that yoga teacher, Diane Malaspina. She used to be in Norfolk. I don't know if she's still there. Um, and and then I went and did as soon as I got out of the Navy, I moved all of my stuff down to Atlanta, put it in a storage unit, and then flew up to Toronto, did a 10-day meditation retreat, biked around Lake Ontario, met my brother in Buffalo, New York, and then traveled a little bit more before starting medical school. That was kind of my freedom tour. And and then I got here and was introduced to CBCT. And I was like, oh, you can actually link meditation with compassion. And this cognitively based compassion training is very much about like analyzing our biases and our beliefs of the world and our understanding of how we operate, to then say, how can I be more compassionate towards myself? How can I be more compassionate towards others? Yeah.
So I think compassion is this like kind of buzzword in the field of medicine. I think it's really amazing how much you really dive deep into what it means to be compassionate. And you found that it's not always directed towards other people. There's also a self aspect to compassion. Can you talk a little bit about the kind of benefits that you gain through compassion training? I know you mentioned helping like avoid burnout and things like that, and any advice you might have to people, so any pre-med students who might be going through this, or medical students, how to kind of pull upon that compassion and mindfulness to prevent some of those common pitfalls.
Yeah. Man, I've been just really baffled by how poorly we take care of medical students and residents and attendings and other allied health professionals, despite being like the supposed experts on health and wellness. And so I think just understand that first and foremost as a pre-med student, as someone applying into medical school, just understand that it's going to be like any other big business, big organization, that there are really some incredible shining lights, individuals out there who truly do find the capacity to do all the things that they have to do in their work, and then also extend just so much care, kindness, and compassion to those around them. Mm-hmm. And there are others who are just so overwhelmed with the work that their bandwidth for those around them is just shortened. And so I think one of the things that is helpful, and I've mostly learned this through CBCT, is just this understanding of self-compassion, that we are not 100% in control of anything. And so when you're studying for the MCAT, right, and really trying to go through this process of amassing all this knowledge for a test that is hard, it's really hard to realize that it's not all on you. That you have learned certain things through your schooling that will either help or not for the MCAT. That you could work tirelessly to learn everything that you need to know for the MCAT and still not know it all. That you could feel that you're the most prepared for the MCAT, but they could still put random questions on there that you'd never seen before. And so to not beat yourself up about that, and to kind of offer yourself a little bit of grace. It's not to say don't try hard, right? It's not to say give up and like whatever happens, happens. But just know that all this work you're putting in is so that you can learn this stuff. And it's, to me, it's really fascinating stuff. It can get frustrating to have to learn it over and over again. But it's fascinating. It's how biology works and makes me be able to sit here and have this conversation with you. And so learn it for the sake of learning it, and And when you're getting tired, check in. Be like, do I need to take a break right now? Like maybe you do, and then give yourself the space to take that break. And if you notice that you're anxious, is it because you don't feel that you've done enough work? Well, then maybe that'll give you a little extra motivation to get a little work done. Like take advantage of that anxiety but don't let it overwhelm you, right? And so I think that's one of the things that's been really helpful. Is just if I didn't get as good of a grade on an exam as I wanted to like understand, like, okay, it's not all on me. Like I let me soften a little bit of that self-criticism, and okay, I'm gonna try again next time. And then I mentioned this in the class the other day. Someone asked about like when you're stuck behind the electronic health record and it's becoming overburdened. Like how do you not become overwhelmed by that frustration? And with that, again, it's kind of about this outward looking of I am here writing this note, and as med students, we really don't have to do that much on the electronic health record, which is something I think we need to change. I think we need more training on that before we get there, but that's a whole other thing. It's, again, seeing that the reason I'm putting in all this work for this note is for the patient on the other side. That can be a little more difficult when we look at the system of healthcare and recognize that there's a lot of the reason we're doing this is for the liability aspect of healthcare. It's for the insurance companies, and so that can be a struggle. But if I part of this mindfulness is not just always staying in the present moment, but also kind of asking myself what will serve me, what will serve others, and if becoming overwhelmed by this broken system of healthcare, it's not going to help me in the moment of writing a note. Right. It might help me when I'm, writing a policy paper or something. But so to say, that's not serving me right now. I'm going to let that go. What will serve is to hold on to the fact that at the other end of this record is a phlebotomist who's actually going to go draw the labs. So let me remember that individual. And there is a patient on the other end that is going to get the medicine that they need because I'm writing this note, or get the PT that they need because I'm putting in this order. And just keep coming back to that when everything else seems frustrating. And what we see is, I feel like it just I feel my shoulders like loosen a little bit, the tightness in my chest softens, and it helps me to remember there is a reason and a purpose behind all of this. And then if we look at like the neuroscience behind it, we see that there's actually, when you tap into this compassion, and the official definition in science of compassion is just this warm-hearted concern that unfolds when we witness the suffering of someone and the motivation to alleviate that suffering. And so, like, it actually is associated with pro-social motivation and positive reward in our brain. And so it's not just hubbubaloo, but we can actually see in the labs that different areas of your brain light up when you tap into this idea of concern for someone else. And not only that, like there's boosts to your immune system. There's So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you so much. I also wanted to touch back on something you talked about a little bit before, about how the hectic life on a submarine, and you also mentioned kind of the hectic life as a physician. How is the schedule, from the boat, like helped prepare you? I know I have a friend who used to work on a nuclear sub, and he said that they did like a 16-hour on, 8-hour off schedule, but it might be changed. Can you talk a little bit about that? And how you think it's prepared you for the field of medicine?
Yeah, that's a good question. They've recently changed it. We used to operate on an 18-hour day, and so as soon as you close the hatch to a submarine, you switch the clocks to whatever ultimate destination you're going to be in, and you start operating in 6-hour shifts. So 6 hours of watch, 6 hours off watch where you clean, you do maintenance, um, study, have a lecture, and then 6 hours of sleep, and then start it all over again. And I think there's something about when you go to, even if you're in port, we don't actually.
Okay, cool.
All right. So we had a little bit of technical difficulties there, but we'll jump right back in the question about how the schedule on the submarine, kind of the unique schedule may have prepared you for medicine and the demands of that as well. Yeah. So I was talking about the underway schedule, and when we close the hatch, you live and breathe your work, and that's just that is the submarine life. But even when we're in port, there's something about you have to go through, you have to get on base first, so you show your ID card, and now you're through one gate. And then to get to the submarine base, you have to go through another gate, one that you can't bring your phone through. Sometimes you can, and then you have to leave your phone at the before you actually climb onto the submarine. And so leaving that up topside. And so once you get onto the submarine, you're kind of just there, and you let the whole outside world go, and you're just doing what you need to do for the submarine and for your shipmates and sailors. And so I think that was helpful in that really I hope that it is the case that as I cross the threshold into the hospital or wherever I'm practicing, I can kind of forget the other things that are going on. If I need to get my oil changed, or I need to go change my tires, or need to go grocery shopping, whatever it is. I hope that I can leave all of that at the door and just kind of give myself to the hospital and be there for the patients and my teammates and whatever's needed. We'll see.
Amazing. So just to sort of close out this episode, is there any advice you have for any students who are currently on the pre-med track or who may already be on that journey in med school?
Yeah, I think it's hard to know what it actually means to practice medicine. And I thought, as a first and second year student, I was getting the idea. And then I actually went into clerkship years, and I was in the hospitals, and I was talking to patients, and I was writing notes and calling social workers, and I just had a much more clear idea of what it means to actually be a doctor. And I shared this with my small group advisor, a mentor, and he was like, "That's exactly right." And still, I didn't know what it meant until I became a resident, and then again once I became an attending, because each, you kind of take on more responsibility along each step. So all that's to say is I remember when I was applying to med school, I had this ideal of being on the other side of medical school and being a doctor. And that's why I was going through all this work. And it really, I had no idea. I thought I did, and I had this ideal. So I think, tap into what is it that you want to be on the other side of your training. Like what do you want to wake up in the morning and go do? And though it may not be entirely accurate for what a physician actually does when they wake up and go into the hospital or do their thing, just kind of like why? That this is what I want to do, and then ask yourself why. Is it for the patients? Is it for the fame? Is it for the money? Right? And just kind of really ask yourself that, and then know that can be the sustaining motivation to get you through the onslaught of studying for the MCAT and taking the MCAT and doing the application process. That's a nightmare. And doing secondary applications as they come in, and going and interviewing. And then, as I'm learning now, again, when you apply to residency, right, and all the interviews that you have to do, and all the money you have to spend just to get into this, and all the money you have to spend
to complete this. If it isn't solid in you why you're doing it, I think it would be so much harder to actually stay the course and keep doing it. So I think really asking yourself that question and know that it may change over time, and that's fine, right? Especially as your idea of what it means to practice solidifies and becomes more clear. But it's not an easy process, and it's not a cheap process. And so you gotta have something to fall back on as to why you're doing all this.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Charlie.
Yeah.
Your story from the Navy to medical school, how you've implemented yoga, meditation, CBCT, it's all been extremely helpful and illuminating. Can you briefly just let anyone who might be listening who could be interested in CBT, will you let them know how they might be able to get involved in that going forward?
Yeah, if you go to compassion.emory.edu, you'll get to the website for the Center for Contemplative Sciences. I think they're starting to call it the Compassion Center now because it's a mouthful otherwise. But there they have access to all the C-learning and CBCT and other programs going on. If you click on the CBCT link, they'll have upcoming courses and things like that. And it's my understanding that they offer free courses to all students. So if you get to a place where you have to pay, you're in the wrong place.
That sounds like such an amazing resource. Thank you for sharing. And we'll just close off with the question we'd like to end each podcast episode on, which is, what resources did you use during your own pathway to medicine, and what would you recommend for pre-health students kind of as they explore different pre-health careers and try to find which one fits their passion?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, I didn't get into med school the first time I applied, and I was on the submarine, and we were in the middle of an evolution of maintenance, and so I remember it was a month-long event we were doing, and I still remember going in, giving an order to raise the pressure in the plant, and then we'd have to hold it there for a while, so then I'd step outside, and I'd go open up my Kaplan book and study for the MCAT. And then go back in, and I didn't do too well on that, but I just used Kaplan and self-study, and then I took the full Kaplan course, which again isn't cheap and comes with a lot of privilege to have access to that, but I took the time to actually dedicate to a Kaplan course for the MCAT, and that drastically improved my MCAT scores, and then I got into medical school, so that was really helpful for me.
Perfect. Thank you so much again for coming. For anyone who wants to connect with you, where can they find you? What platforms do you use?
I've tried to stay away from the social media.
Probably a good choice.
Please email me if you have any questions. My email is clane, CLANE 9 @emory.edu. I think that's probably the best way.
Well, thank you again. Thank you for everyone for listening to our second episode of Fireside Chats. Hopefully we will continue this podcast, but thank you for being our first non-pre-health advising office guest. You were absolutely amazing.
Well, thanks for having me. This is really great. I hope I've helped a little bit. And, this is just inspiring to see you guys doing these conversations and helping other students. I think that's a big part of also what I'm working on, right? Helping one another. You guys are a prime example of that.
Thank you.